So we're in Mongolia, the land of roving horses and endless green steppes. Here's the thing. 800 years ago, this awesome and terrifying force just galloped out from this corner of the world and absolutely demolished the civilizations of the old world. Kings who thought they were sacred and castles considered impregnable, they all fell before the dynasty of Genghis Khan. And man, you can't forget the conqueror's name here. It's literally plastered on everything. Banks, streets, booze, chocolate, you name it. They've basically named every respectable thing after him. There's even a whole city named after him, the airport too. Our Mongolian guide explains that this was a chapter of history Mongolians weren't always free to talk about. He tells us, overall, we were always proud of Genghis Khan. We're proud that we're descendants of the great Genghis Khan and the golden lineage. But like Buddhism, talking about Genghis Khan was forbidden. On this journey across this incredible country, we explored a culture and history that was built, nearly destroyed, and today is in the midst of a revival. This is the story of Mongolia. Arriving in Mongolia, after a brutal 30-something hour journey from the other side of the planet, we touched down on the runway of Genghis Khan Airport. When you spend thousands of hours reading, writing, and illustrating the history of a place, visiting feels like you've just stepped into a storybook. We spent the first jet-lag day or so wandering around the capital city of Ulaanbaatar. We spent cash blazing with Genghis Khan, gazed up at Genghis Khan and his warriors at the government palace, and headed toward the National Genghis Khan Museum. The museum was stocked with relics of steppe warriors and their kin, recreations of Mongol monuments and treasures. On the upper floors, to our surprise, the curators were actually displaying clips of Mongol history content. It felt like a full-circle moment. We were in Mongolia because we're known for our Mongol history work, and we arrived to find the National Museum literally displaying similar content. Out onto the steppe. The next morning we set out. The city gave way to green expanse. Everywhere I looked were galloping horses, grazing sheep and goats. Mongolia is the least densely populated independent nation in the world. Only 2 people per square kilometer. Once you're outside the city, these long, empty stretches are only occasionally broken up by the sight of distant clusters of yurts. Up to 40% of Mongolians live as nomads. For many thousands of years, humans have survived on the Mongolian steppe. Nomads tended their herds of horses, sheep, goats, and cattle, moving to new pastures throughout the year. The animals provided material for clothing and building, as well as the nomad diet of mostly meat and dairy. With each migration, the people moved their belongings by animal and cart, including their houses, known today as yurts or gers. These steppe settlements comprise a number of gers insulated by felt. The collapsible lattice frame became prominent during the Mongol Empire and still makes up the basic dwelling of nomadic herders, though today's gers are somewhat flatter in shape and reinforced with wooden doors. Meat and dairy endure as staples of the diet. The steppe is too dry for mass agriculture. These traditional ways of life are maintained here largely because of their practicality, not because people are unwilling to innovate. The nomadic lifestyle is actually complemented by modern technology. Nomads often manage long-distance travel by car and truck, or herd their animals by motorcycle. Many of the gers we visited were equipped with solar panels and satellite dishes. Nomad children attend school, and many go on to earn college degrees. The Colossus and the history. As we rode along, we finally saw it gleaming over the flatlands, the Colossus of Mongolia. 250 tons of stainless steel in the image of Genghis Khan. Menacing, commanding, and absolutely breathtaking. We climbed winding stairs up to the head of the horse, which hangs over the windy expanse. There was an aura of medieval legend here, an abandoned child had become king of the world, his statue towering over his homeland centuries later. The people of the steppe had been masters of mounted archery well before the Mongol Empire. Over the millennia, they'd founded several formidable empires. But before the rise of Genghis Khan in the late 12th century, the eastern steppe had become the stage of constant warfare among rival Mongol and Turkic lineages. The unification of these peoples was dramatized for us later that day in a spectacular show of acrobatic horse riding, music, and dancing. Children in the audience cheered as Temujin, Genghis Khan, broke his enemies and founded the Mongol state, a move that represented the first step toward building the empire. Then the show ended. I loved it, but I was surprised. No massive conquests, no thundering destruction of Khwarezmian Empire, no invasion of China. Our guide explained in his own words, he was a hero who united all the Mongol tribes. The unification of all the Mongol tribes is actually much more important for us than conquering the whole world and ruling everything. Genghis Khan had established for his followers a state where clan affiliations would be eroded and armies organized practically, where Mongols of the lowest social class could rise to command the most powerful armies in the world. The slave-turned-general Macaulay stands beside the great Khan at the Parliament building today. There are a range of opinions on Genghis Khan throughout Mongolia, but it's almost entirely his role as a founding father that inspires admiration. Buddhism and tradition. We pressed on toward a nearby Buddhist temple perched on the side of a mountain. The track up was marked by monuments, flags, and signs with mantras. A walk over a swaying footbridge brought us to the foot of the stairs. We climbed up to observe the elegant temple and wandered its hazy interiors. The native religion of the Mongols held Tungri, the eternal blue heaven, as the universal will and creator, and relied on shamans to mediate the spiritual realm of the world. But during the Mongol Empire, some nobles also embraced the faiths of outsiders. Some, including Kublai Khan, became patrons of the Buddhist lamas of Tibet. Common Mongols remained largely shamanistic until the 16th century, well after the empire had fallen, when certain Mongol princes converted. Tibetan lamas enjoyed their patronage and conferred religious legitimacy on Mongol rulers. Temples were built across the steppelands, sparking widespread conversion to Mongolian Buddhism, a Tibetan-affiliated faith that also accommodated some Mongol customs. The Buddhist pantheon, for instance, recognized Genghis Khan as a minor deity. Nomad life in the desert. Back at camp, dinners were relaxing and hearty meals made richer by good conversation. As daylight faded and the temperature dropped, we retired to our fire-warmed gers. Over the next few days, we spent time with the Nomad family. We gifted them souvenirs from our home countries, asked questions, and tried our hand at making dumplings. A traditional folk concert was our last spectacle in the region before we undertook the long drive south into the Gobi Desert. I saw fewer people on these barren landscapes, more passing camels and scorched cliffs. Green vegetation still carpeted much of the Gobi, and after some days we came to the narrow pass of Yolin AM. For just a few bucks, Mongolians would guide you through on horseback. The horses that build an empire aren't tall, muscle-bound, or aggressive, but charmingly stout. They're docile, accustomed to extreme weather, and have excellent stamina. In medieval times, Mongols were tied into the saddle from infancy. They rode as naturally as they walked and developed incredible command of mounted archery. Each Mongol rode the warpath with several reserve horses that he could switch to as soon as one tired, making Mongol attacks relentless. It was otherworldly to now find ourselves in Mongolia riding these horses as sunlight crested cliffs overhead. As with the horse ride, most of our guides were children taking part in the family business. My guide through the pass told me he was 15. I asked him how long he'd been guiding horse rides, and he replied, 10 years. The dark century. Although technically in the land of the eternal blue sky, clouds had followed us for most of our journey. They opened up as night fell in the desert. Untouched by light pollution, the stars of the Gobi appeared over our gers. On one cold night, a few of us stayed up talking as we watched a meteor shower shimmer across the Milky Way. The ancient peoples of the steppe were in constant awe of the heavens above, which they equated with the creator Tungri. The Mongols continue to venerate Tungri even after their widespread conversion to Buddhism. The Buddhist wave established a scholarly and religious institution across Mongolia, over which Tibetan lamas wielded influence. But the Mongolian steppe itself was politically fractured in the 17th century, so the Manchus of the Qing dynasty took advantage and conquered the Mongols. Some Buddhist lamas resisted, but their institutions became a tool for the Qing to manipulate and exert control over local Mongol rulers. The Qing ruled for centuries until the weakening dynasty suffered rebellion in 1911 and collapsed. With the support of Russian troops, Mongolians under Buddhist leader Bog Khan asserted independence, though a region known as Inner or South Mongolia remained under Chinese control. Cut between China and Russia, independent Mongolia over the next decade again fell to China and then became a theater in the Russian Civil War, ravaged by the White Army. Eventually, the victorious Soviets backed a revolution by Mongolian socialists, and so came the long-awaited triumph of independence. But true sovereignty still eluded the Mongolian people under the Soviets. Our guide explained, "We were like a satellite state, and even though we were not part of the Soviet Union, we had to kind of follow them. So Buddhism was forbidden. Any Mongolian trade, military, and policy were subject to the whims of Soviet leaders. The Mongolian People's Revolutionary Party purged political dissidents, including those who questioned Soviet influence and lamas of the once influential Buddhist clergy. Buddhist institutions had served as the Mongolian educational system, and lamas comprised a large fraction of the Mongolian population. What began as a state effort to break the clerical establishment became an assault on Buddhist worship, which the state cast as savage backward and a hindrance to the productivity of the nation. At the insistence of Joseph Stalin, who was then waging his own bloody war on the Russian Orthodox Church, Mongolian leader Koibil San and his secret police oversaw a reign of terror against Buddhist lamas and their supporters over the 1930s. Our guide said most of them were killed and the rest were captured but never seen again. You know pretty much what that means. This campaign completely erased Buddhism from Mongolian culture. In an all-out assault, lamas were beaten, thrown into labor camps, or shot. Their bodies were left to rot in uncovered pits. Monasteries were torn down, burned, or used as prison camps or to house Russian soldiers. Tens of thousands of lamas were slain. Many more apostatized. Their religious houses and records were reduced to ash. Some common families took to practicing Buddhism in secret, but many abandoned their faith out of fear. The government also suppressed national icons. When the regime helped mount a vigorous Mongolian resistance to the Japanese invasion in World War II, Mongolian troops rallied around the warrior image of Genghis Khan. But soon after the war, the state banned all positive discussion of the national hero. Historian Timothy May notes this was true not only in public speeches, but also in the work of historians. Quite simply, unless one wrote in an anti-Genghis tone, the manuscript could not be published. Genghis Khan represented a distinct Mongolian identity and a figure whose empire once dominated Russian lands. Under Soviet influence, the traditional Mongolian script was replaced by Cyrillic. Buddhism and Genghis Khan remained suppressed in Mongolian culture until the 1990s, when Mongolians mobilized to establish democracy and the Soviet Union fell. The revival. This is the context in which Mongolians have come to embrace Genghis Khan as a national symbol. Long suppressed, monuments to him are not terribly old. The mighty statues of Genghis and his kin around the government palace were completed in 2006 for the 800-year anniversary of the founding of the Mongol Empire. Not long after, the massive statue of Genghis Khan was constructed. As we sat in my ger in the desert, our guide explained the importance of the conqueror today. Because of our geopolitical situation sandwiched between Russia and China, we kind of feel small, economically weak. He's used as motivation. Once we were the strong young nation, we had so much potential. The actual history of Genghis Khan and the Mongols is remarkable. Civilizations across 2 continents knelt before the once underestimated nomads of Mongolia. For an often neglected country wrestling with geopolitical pressure and modern domestic issues, the memory that this land was once the center of power in the world seems to many here one worth remembering. Our guide put it perfectly. We try to remind and actually teach the next generation that we are not a small country. We were a really powerful nation. The journey's end. In our travels, we'd seen so much, made so many friends, and met so many kind strangers. We finally departed Mongolia in awe of its history, culture, and legendary hospitality. This land of Genghis Khan, once the center of the world, suppressed for generations, and now proudly reclaiming its heritage, left an unforgettable mark on us.